Welcome back on Guard Army. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. Today, instead of going over a singular deck for a deck profile, we're going to be going over a couple of deck lists that I am considering on bringing to the upcoming Orlando Regional Championships. Orlando Regionals is an event that comes around once a year. Sometimes it's Daytona, sometimes it's Orlando. Regionals are scattered championship events that are around the globe that happen in regions throughout different states, whether it be North America, South America, all around the world kind of thing. But they're massive tournaments with 9 best-of-3 rounds day 1, and if you go 6-2-1 or greater, you get to go into day 2 and play an additional 5 to 6 rounds, and then the top 8 play it out in a single elimination bracket. So it's some of the biggest events you can possibly go to. And this is my sort of breakdown of the meta and the list that I'm considering, and what I think they're favored into. So to start, we have Future Box. This list has been a lot of fun to play, and Iron Treads definitely helps with the Chi and Pal matchup, which otherwise is a little bit of a struggle. Not to mention the fact that it also swings for fighting weakness when it has a Future Booster Energy capsule attached. I think that it is great for swinging the prize trade in a bunch of different matchups. This can swing into Arceus favorably, it can swing into other Iron Hands favorably, Miraidon favorably, Chi and Pal especially favorably. That's the main reason I've decided to include this. The Iron Crowns boost up the damage of all of your future Pokemon, so if you can boost it with 2 Iron Crowns and a Future Booster Energy Capsule, you're taking knockouts on Chi and Pal, Arceus V, and also Iron Hands. In addition to that, if you have all 3 crowns down and a Future Booster Energy Capsule, you can one-shot an Arceus V-Star. Although normally you'll want to poke it with Peak Acceleration, accelerate onto Iron Treads, and then swing with Iron Treads into it. That's generally the route you want to go there. But I say that this, being able to cover 2 different weaknesses, helps so much in like a toolbox kind of counterbox style deck. Then we have Iron Leaves EX with the Rapid Vernier ability. This is when you play it onto your bench, you get to move as many energy as you want to it, and then move it to the active. This is great into Zard. The fact that we play 2 of them means we can knock out 2 Zards consecutively. The first one we can go Peak Acceleration to Grass to 2 different Pokemon, and then Rapid Vernier up, attach to it, and then swing for knockout on Zard. After that, they'll swing, they'll KO the leaves, and then we go Reboot Pod, Techno Radar for second Iron Leaves, and then bench the Iron Leaves, move the energy all up, and then take second Zard knockout. So this is the way that we win the Zard matchup. Against Lugia, the Iron Hands is very, very relevant, with Ampu very much being able to take 2 prizes on the Cinccino's or 3 prizes on the Lugias. You can pretty easily swing the prize trade. So you can go Peak Acceleration into a Cinccino on turn 1, and then accelerate onto Hands. They struggle to knock out Hands immediately, and they're not the most consistent deck in the world. So if you go Heavy Baton onto Hands, and then Peak Acceleration to it, even if they gust up and knock out 1, you can move the energies to the other Iron Hands, and then you're chillin'. Iron Treads, as I said, hits multiple weaknesses. Bundle is super good in this meta for being able to push your opponent's Pokemon to the bench. If they've got something like a Noivern in the active or something like that, you can push it to the bench, boss it back up, and knock it out to remove the effect on it. Definitely great into things like Goudra V-Star, Regidrago V-Star, Noivern EX, etc, etc. This is just very good. Also, if there's anything that you want to just like knock out on their bench, you can just push them to the bench, and if any of the bench Pokemon that they have are good targets, that's great. If you just specifically don't want to swing into whatever their active is, this allows you to play around so many different situations in this meta. I absolutely love the bundle in this deck. Miraidon EX is just a really good big attacker. You can go Peak Acceleration into Repulsion Bolt to KO basically anything, or to 2-shot basically anything in the game, and then after that you attach 1 more in Cyber Drive and 1-shot up to V-Stars, honestly. You go Cyber Drive with Future Booster and 2 Iron Crown down, and you're swinging for 280. It's an absolutely insane benchmark to be swinging for. And then we have Mew EX. Genome hacking actually can come in handy here. If you put EXP share onto Mew, which I've found very relevant, you go EXP share onto Mew, and then you move an energy over, and then you go attach, and then you energy switch over 1, and then you're swinging with genome hacking in a single turn. I really like having the option to use genome hacking, but the main reason for this is a lot of times we're going to be playing down the cards in our hand for combos, and then we can restart and draw additional cards. We're playing 4 Arven because it is definitely the best supporter in this deck. Being able to, in the early game, go Arven for Techno Radar, Future Booster, Energy Capsule, Future Booster, retreat into the Miraidon that we grabbed off Techno Radar and attach, and then peak acceleration to another one of our targets, which would be the second thing that we grabbed off Techno Radar, is so good. And we've got 2 Research, 2 Iono, 2 Boss, just to have like a spread of different supporters that we can use throughout the game. Then the 4 Techno Radar grabbing any of our future Pokemon. The only thing it doesn't grab is the Mew, which we can grab off Nest Ball. So sometimes we can go Arven for Nest Ball for Mew to be able to draw a little bit. We've got Hisuian Heavy Ball because we do have a couple of one-ofs and a couple of Pokemon that are relevant at having both of them in certain matchups, whether it be like Lugia needing both Iron Hands and being able to go Heavy Baton from one into the other, or against Zard needing both Iron Leaves. Heavy Ball is definitely great for being able to get the specific pieces that we need, and also in a best-of-3 format, it makes prize checking a lot easier, because if you Hisuian Heavy Ball, you can just note down what your prizes are real fast. Then there's 2 Switch Cart, 2 Energy Switch, an Earthen Vessel to be able to search out one of our many energy. We do play 4 different types of energy here. Counter Catcher, so if we fall behind in the early game, for example, if we go Peak Acceleration into a 2-prizer, not taking the knockout, and then they go knock out our Miraidon, we can now Counter Catcher up the specific target that we want, especially if it's that damage target that we already hit with Miraidon that they just retreat to the bench. Counter Catcher can chase that a little bit easier, and it's something we can grab off of the Arven. Then we've got Lost Vacuum for removing any pesky tools like Heavy Batons, Bravery Charms, stuff like that, Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. Definitely great to have this. It's also nice for removing certain stadiums that may come down, for example, League Headquarters. Then we've got a Super Rod for being able to manage our attackers and energy, considering the weird splits of Pokemon and energy that we have. A Reboot Pod. This is our ace spec of choice. Attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of your future Pokemon. This can just flood energy on the field in the mid to late game. Sometimes you'll use it in the early game if you want to go, like, Peak Acceleration onto Iron Hands and then go Reboot Pod Attach. But one thing that I've really liked to do is I go Peak Acceleration 2 onto Hands, and then I go Attach to Hands and Energy Switch off of the Miraidon onto Hands if they don't knock it out. Or if we establish an EXP share on something else, we can Energy Switch over from wherever the EXP share was to the Hands. So there's a lot of different combinations that you can use through this. We've got 4 Future Booster Energy Capsule because we need this for the Iron Treads, as well as being able to retreat from any of our other Pokemon, and it just being a 20 damage modifier is insane. I would not play any less than 4 of this card. This card is absolutely busted. It completely ties this deck together. 1 EXP share for being able to preserve some energy. This can be great for preserving energy for a second Iron Leaves play after we've used the first. Bravery Charm can make one of our Pokemon that we want to set up with Peak Acceleration stick around a little bit longer. And Heavy Baton can allow us to chain Iron Hands or chain energy from Iron Hands to some of our other Pokemon. So it's definitely a nice one-of inclusion here. Then we've got 2 Town Stores for being able to search out any of our tools as being our stadium of choice. We can stadium bump things like League Headquarters or I guess Temple of Sinnoh doesn't really matter, but sometimes it'll just be things that they want for their game plan, like being able to bump a Pokestop is really good with this, especially if they're going like Pokestop aggressively. Normally they don't have tools, so bumping with Town Store means that they can shuffle their deck, they can search through their deck, but there's not really going to be anything they're grabbing off of it. Then we've got 4 Lightnings, 4 Grass, 2 Psychic, and 2 Metal to be able to use our attackers throughout the game. Obviously with a lean into the Lightning and Grass, because the Iron Hands and Leaves are our 2 most relevant attackers. I would say that this particular deck is favored into Zard because of the Iron Leaves. It's even into Iron Hands because of the Iron Treads hitting the fighting weakness and being able to actually KO them pretty consistently. I'd say versus Lugia it's favored because of the double hands. Ancient Box is even. We can trade pretty favorably with the Iron Hands, but it does make it a little bit awkward if they Ancient Booster Energy Capsule up. We can still KO with Arm Press, and it is hard for them to hit those numbers. I think Bravery Charm makes this matchup a lot easier, but it's definitely a toss-up at times. Like, we can definitely swing the prize trade with Ampu very much, but they can eventually get to those massive knockouts with the Baby Roaring Moon, and them being a one-prize deck means they have more opportunities to kind of come back throughout a game. So I would say it's about an even matchup. Versus Chi and Pal, we're favored mainly due to the Iron Treads. I think it would be even, or maybe even slightly unfavored if we were not playing the Treads. But because we're playing the Treads, we can go Miraidon, Accelerate to Treads, and then we have potentially 2 attackers. We could put one here, attach for turn to either of them, regardless of what gets knocked out. The Sparking Tackle with 2 Iron Crowns and a Future Booster can KO the Chi and Pal, and this with 2 Crowns and a Future Booster can KO the Chi and Pal. So having multiple one-prize attackers that KO a 2-prizer in that matchup helps to swing the prize trade super easily. And the Iron Treads having 130 health instead of like 120 or 110 means that you actually live one of their Iron Hands hits. Against Control, I would say it's pretty even, because we can pull ahead with things like Ampu very much. We can make plays like that. We play 2 Switch Cart, we play 4 Future Booster Energy Capsule and energies to attack with anything aside from the bundle, but the bundle we can just clear off our bench the moment we bench it. The Iron Leaves also serve as another switching effect that can actually take those big KOs into things like a Bravery Charmed Snorlax. The Prism Edge can actually hit that 200 number with Iron Crown or Future Booster Energy Capsule, and work as a switching effect, so you're putting on more pressure against them. I definitely think that matchup is even, because they can just continually go Counter Catcher onto your Crowns and kind of push you back. But I definitely think that's an even matchup. The Arc decks, I would say it's even mainly because of the Treads. The Treads hitting the fighting typing means that you can put on pressure throughout the game. And the Miraidon EX is going to be our other main attacker in that deck. Going Peak Acceleration onto Miraidon with Bravery Charm on it means that you are out of range of a Max Belt KO. So they need to find both Vacuum, Boss, and Max Belt all at the same time in order to KO this before it starts putting on pressure. So I love the inclusion of Miraidon with the Bravery Charm here, because it makes it so easy to get those big knockouts against Arc decks, especially Arcus-Tina. Lost-Tina, I would say, is unfavored. It's hard to chase their Giratina V-Stars on the bench as they set them up with their Comfeys in the active. We can definitely, like, try and swing the prize trade with Ampu very much into Comfeys. We can take easy prizes in the early game with Peak Acceleration onto the Comfeys, and we have Hyper Blower to be able to phase them to the bench if we want to just hit anything that's on their bench. But I definitely think that the fact that they have this big attacker that they can just kind of set up in the back makes it where they can kind of steamroll us if they get set up. I would say it's not impossible. I would just say it's like a little bit unfavored, but it's definitely the more unfavored Lost Box matchup. I would say that Lost Box in general, like the regular ones that play like Raikou, Iron Hands, Roaring Moon, stuff like that, I would say we're favored into those. We can win the prize trade way more consistently against those kind of decks. Lost-Tina being a little bit unfavored, and then I also think that Sablezard is a little bit unfavored. We can take 2 prizes on like the Sablezard, on the Radiant Charizard, and the Sableye, and the Comfeys. So I think it's like, it's kind of close, but I still think it's a little bit unfavored just because they can loop the Radiant Charizard, and it's hard for us to consistently Iron Hands through it. I do think the Bravery Charm makes that a little bit easier, although they can set up Math and they do play Vacuums. So I think that that matchup is a little bit harder, but it's definitely still winnable. I think this deck has a lot of winnable matchups, even if they are a little bit unfavored. Now let's move on to the next deck, Gouging Fire. This deck is one of the fastest decks in the format, I have to say. This Pokemon right here does 260 damage for 2 fire and a colorless, which seems like a lot, but you can go Sada, Magma Base, and attach, and you're swinging for 260 immediately. And with Iron Valiant EX, if it comes up to the bench, or comes up from the bench, you can ping something for 20 damage, meaning you can spread to the bench to set up Math, or you can hit the active with Tachyon Bits, retreat into Gouging Fire and hit for 260 plus the 20, meaning you're hitting V-Star numbers of 260. We've got Entei and Delphox as two different, this one being a 2-energy attacker, which is relevant, with fleet-footed to draw an additional card. Also being a Forest Stone target is very good. Delphox being able to swing the prize trade with Magical Flare and hitting 120 to the active and 120 to the bench is relevant. And Moltres being a 1-prize attacker that attacks for 1 energy off of Magma Basin is great, so we can allocate 1 off Magma Basin and 1 to something else while we set up for the rest of the game. 2 Mew EX. The genome hacking is definitely a relevant attack that can be used in this deck with energy switches, but it's mainly here because we want to be thinning our hand consistently and drawing cards off restart. As I said, we've got Valiant here as a pivot that also pings. You can also go retreat into Iron Valiant and then switch cart into Gouging Fire, which is nice. We have Iron Leaves here because otherwise Zard would be a hard matchup. This makes the Zard matchup even. We can go Sada 2 grass into play and then Rapid Vernier and attach. Or we can go Sada 1 grass in play, attach other grass, Magma Basin to bench, and then move it all up when we play the Iron Leaves to move up the energy. This definitely can take out a Zard just out of nowhere and completely throw them off their game sometimes. So Iron Leaves is a great inclusion here just for making the Zard matchup even. Squawk makes us able to hit that turn 1 Blaze Blitz super consistently. Just being able to go Nest Ball for Squawk and seize away some energy just to be able to Sada and then Magma Basin and then attach. Absolutely brilliant. We can very easily swing for the biggest of knockouts on turn 1, and we can go as far as to chase down a 2-prizer on their bench on turn 1 with Prime Catcher. We've got concealed cards as our Radiant of choice over something like Radiant Zard or Radiant Heatran, mainly because we need ways to get our fires in discard so we can Magma Basin and Sada's Vitality. Then we've got 4 Sada's Vitality. It's the most relevant card in this deck. Choose up to 2 your ancient Pokemon and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of them. If you attached any energy this way, draw 3 cards. It's basically Melanie for ancients, but it can be to up to 2 and for any color energy. Absolutely broken card. And we've got 1 Iono and 1 Boss. We've got a Pal Pad, so we can reuse stuff like this, but we want to focus on using Sada on most of our turns. We've got 4 Ultra Ball and 4 Nest Ball. Ultra Ball is a nice sack out for the fires, as well as Nest Ball being able to grab any of our basics. The Ultra Ball is also relevant for thinning down our hand for restart, or for grabbing Iron Leaves straight to our hand instead of putting it straight to our bench, so we can actually proc the Rapid Vernier ability. We've got 4 Switch Cart to be able to pivot to reuse Blaze Blitz, 3 Earthen Vessel because 3 sack outs that also grab energy is very good. Being able to grab 2 energy off this and then pitch something else with Ultra Ball always gives you the cards that you really need to be able to do the combos that you want. Then we've got 2 Pokegears for finding our Sadas and 2 Trekking Shoes for a little bit of extra just raw dig into our deck. 2 energy switches for being able to pull off some burst plays. For example, if we go Sada to 2 Gouging Fire, attach to 1, energy switch over from 1, or Magma Basin to Delphox, attach to Delphox, Sada to Gouging Fire, energy switch over from that onto Delphox to be able to set up a Magical Fire attack in a single turn. Then we've got a Lost Vacuum because there's a lot of relevant tools that we just want to get rid of, whether it be Heavy Baton, Forest Seal Stone, Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, you name it. It's very important to be able to remove tools in this meta. Heroescape is also a relevant one that you might see pop up at a regional level periodically. Then there is Super Rod for being able to manage our energy and our Pokemon, Pal Pad for being able to manage our supporters, Prime Catcher for our ace spec of choice because pivoting between our pivots as well as being able to gust up things is super relevant in this deck. We want to be super aggro, so having Prime Catcher is great. 1 Future Booster Energy Capsule that we can use as a pivot for Valiant, or to modify the damage of our Iron Leaves. A Forest Seal Stone to be able to have a 1-of card that searches for anything in our deck. 4 Magma Basin, because Magma Basin is broken. It just is able to accelerate an energy just straight up to one of our bench. Like, it's energy acceleration on a stadium. That's wild. Then we've got 7 Fire Energy and 3 Grass Energy. I would say that against Zard, this is even because of the Iron Leaves. Against hands, we're favored because we just kind of outspeed them by a large margin. Against Lugia, we're favored because we can go ping 260, and V-Guard Energy does not block damage from EXs. Against Ancient Box, I'd say we're unfavored. We could make the matchup even if we were playing Ancient Booster Energy Capsules, but at present we're not because I'm focusing more on consistency than bulk. Consistency and raw, like turbo, rather than bulk. Because after they build up their Roaring Moons, they can kind of just press through the game. It's not an impossible matchup because we can just go 260 through Ancient Booster Energy Capsuled stuff. But eventually they'll just hit the Roaring Moon numbers and be able to swing through our entire deck. So I think that one's one that we don't trade as favorably with. Chi and Pao is unfavored. They don't need very many energy to take the KOs, and if they go first, they are kind of outpacing us. We can try and keep up with them by going first and being able to outpace that, but it's tough. It's a tough matchup. Against Arc decks, we are definitely favored because we just go 260, ping 280. They're not really able to do much about that. Against Control, we're favored because we have 4 switch outs, as well as being able to move energy and attack with the majority of our stuff. It's a little bit tough if we get stuck with like Greninja, Squawk, or Valiant, but we are aggressive and able to KO anything in Control, so I'd say that matchup is fine. Wasnt-Tina, I would say we are actually favored against. In the early game, we can pressure with Inferno Wings and take prizes on Comfies, and then we can just go, okay, I'm going to Prime Catcher your setup Tina on the bench, and then bonk. This is one of the things that we can literally just set up and KO a Tina V-Star. Like, there's not a lot of decks that can say they can do that. Lost Box, I would say, is even. We can trade pretty favorably with Moltres. We can potentially pull off a Magical Fire play out of nowhere. Sometimes they won't bench Manaphy because they don't expect us to be able to pull this off in a single turn. And then against Sable Zard, I'd say it's unfavored just because they can Radiant Zard through our entire deck once they get to the point where they can Radiant Zard. Radiant Zard is terrifying for a lot of these, like, 2-prize big basic decks. So I'd say Sable Zard is definitely the hardest Lost Box matchup. But yeah, let's move on to Deck 3. Deck 3 is Arcus-Tina. Tried and true, but with a little bit of spice. We are playing an Aerodactyl V-Star just to make it where Lugia isn't basically an auto-loss. If we go first, and we manage to Ancient Star, Lugia is favored. If they go first, and they use their V-Star power on turn 2, then we are definitely unfavored. So, let me adjust this a little bit, there we go. We've got a 4-3 Arc line. We want to be able to Trinity Nova to our Giratinas and our Aerodactyl. The Aerodactyl is also relevant because swinging for 240 means you're swinging for the 2-prize knockouts, even after we use Maximum Belt to get a 2-prize knockout with Trinity Nova. I think that's relevant. The Giratina V-Star can swing through even as far up as Charizard because of the Maximum Belt. Definitely relevant. Starbirth is just pure consistency. Search your deck for 2 cards is busted. We've got the Iron Leaves because we can flood grass energy onto the field, and then we place it down, and then we can move it up, and then we can one-shot a Zard. Absolutely insane. A 2-2 Bibarel as our main draw engine with a 1 of Squovit. Squovit also helps against, like, if they do manage to stall something, like if you're stuck with, like, a Bidoof or something like that. Squovit can be a way to just kind of force a tie against Control, but I do think that we are favored against Control regardless. We've got 3 Iono and 3 Judge for Disruptive Draw, 3 Boss for being able to pull up specific targets, 2 Airy, this card is broken. Your opponent reveals their hand, you discard up to 2 item cards you find there. This can sometimes just win you games. If you play this at the right time, discard like 2 Superior Energy Retrievals from Golden Go or Chi and Pao, and they suddenly can't hit enough energy to win the game. 2 Candies against Zard, and they suddenly can't evolve up enough stuff. Like, Airy is absolutely broken if you manage to hit the right things. Against Lost Box, you can just hit 2 Mirage Gates, and then they're basically out of the game. And then we've got a Turo Scenario. This helps against Control, as well as getting a damaged Mon off our field. If we start a Bibarel and we're against Control, we could always go Turo, pick up the Bibarel so they can no longer stall it. Definitely a relevant card to be having. Sharon's Care is definitely a consideration for an inclusion over this slot, but for right now, because of how popular Control is, I'm going with Turo instead. We've got 4 Nest Ball and 4 Ultra Ball for being able to find our basics and our evolutions throughout the game. Ultra Ball also being able to discard down our hand to drop more off the barrel. 2 switching effects, or, well, I guess 2 switches. We also have another switching effect in Jet Energy. a Lost Vacuum for removing things like Bravery Charm, so we can actually go Maximum Belt, Trinity Nova, knock out a 2-prizer, even if they try to Bravery Charm it. A Super Rod to be able to put back energy and Pokemon throughout the game. Maximum Belt for being able to hit 330 with Tina, or 230 with Arc V-Star, or 290 with Aerodactyl. I mean, that could be relevant against, like, Golden Go with Full Metal Lab. But that's, like, one of the only situations I see that kind of coming up in with this particular attacker. We've got Choice Belt here, which means that we can take knockouts on some of the lower HP basic Vs, or with Lost Impact, we can actually KO a Lugia V-Star with V-Guard energy on it. That's a relevant one to have. We've got one Lost City because it makes the Sablezard matchup a little bit better. We've got 5 Grass Energies because we want mainly Grass, mainly for the Iron Leaves. 3 Psychic because we still need to pay that Lost Impact cost. 4 Double Turbo Energy because we need to be able to Trinity Nova as soon as possible, and this lets us do that. It also can be the 1 card that we discard off of Lost Impact because it counts as 2 energy. Then we've got 1 Jet Energy as a switching effect that is also an energy. So if we go DTE turn 1, Starbirth for Jet Energy, this acts as both a energy and a switch, which is nice. And then 1 Fighting so we can actually attack with that Lost Dive attack on Aerodactyl V-Star. I would say that this deck is favored into Zard, favored into hands, favored into Lugia only if you go first and pull off the Aerodactyl attack, otherwise it's unfavored. Ancient Box you're favored against because it's hard for them to actually take the knockouts on these things, so you can just kind of go Trinity Nova, accelerate onto another Arceus, Trinity Nova for 200, knockout whatever's there, even with Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. Repeat. You just kind of keep doing that throughout the entire game, and they can't really do much about it. I'd say this is a really bad matchup for Ancient Box. Chien-Pao is unfavored. Like, you can theoretically still win the game if you go first, and then you go KO on Chien-Pao EX for 2 prizes, or you, like, Airy 2 candies out of their hand. Like, again, Airy can just kind of randomly win games. But if they get set up, they kind of just go, drop 5 energies, and knock out Arceus. 5 energies, knock out Tina. Like, they're hitting those numbers pretty consistently. Against Control, we're favored because we can kind of be completely self-sufficient and just accelerate onto things, and then just kind of hit through everything they have. Shred also works to hit through Mimikyu if they play Mimikyu. The only thing that is a little bit of a problem in that matchup is, like, Bibarel, or, like, if they stall Bibarel or stall Squirtle. The Squirtle, even if they're, like, stalling it, it doesn't matter too much, because Nestash can kind of just force a tie against them. It's hard for them to actually deck you out if you're just constantly putting your hand on the bottom of your deck. But Bibarel is definitely the thing that they want to stall most, which is part of why we play Turo. Arc decks I would say that we are favored into because Lost Impact can just shred through most Arc attackers, and the ones that it can't, Lost Dive hits super effectively on Arc V-Star even if it has V-Guard energy on it, so I would say that this is the one Arc deck that beats other Arc decks, rather than kind of losing to other Arc decks, or going even with other Arc decks. I would say we're unfavored into Lost Tina, because they kind of do exactly what this deck does, but faster. So, like, they're generally gonna outpace you. Lost Box normally is favored. I would say Lost Tina, you could still just randomly Airy 2 Mirage Gates out of their hand, and they can kind of just lose. So, not unwinnable. You can definitely win that matchup. Regular Lost Box, I would say, is favored. They could be playing a Hoopa EX, so look out for that. It's definitely fine to play around, but if you accelerate too much, you can just get bopped by a Hoopa EX, which does make the matchup kind of even. I would say if they're not playing Hoopa EX, it's very favored for you. If they are playing Hoopa EX, it's even. And against Sablezard, I would say you are favored because it's hard for them to hit the knockouts on these things. You kind of just push your way through Sablezard, and it's hard for them to keep pace with your big HP Pokemon. Now on to list 4. This one is Arceus-Armorouge. This one I am definitely a large fan of. This one's probably my favorite Arc deck right now. It's a little bit clunkier just because of the amount of evolutions that you play through this deck, but we've got a 4-3 Arc line. a 2/2 Armourouge with Fire Off to move fire from any of our Pokemon to our active Pokemon, which is nice. This allows us to set up with Trinity Nova onto another Arceus, and then move it up to other fire attackers such as Gouging Fire, Delphox, or Radiant Heatran, or even the Armourouge, if you need a one-prize attacker to try and swing prize trades. Could also move up to the Mew for genome hacking, because that's super relevant in multiple matchups. You can move it up, you can copy like a Lost Impact and just hit through a Giratina V-Star, which I do like the ability to do. We've got a 1/1 Bibarel. We don't want to rely too heavily on this, and we don't want too many evolution Pokemon that we're trying to establish. So we've got a 1/1 of this, and also a Mew EX for that restart draw. We have a Gouging Fire EX, because hitting for 260 in an Arc deck is super relevant, and with Choice Belt, you can hit for 290 and KO V-Stars. Delphox V can swing the prize trade a little bit by spreading some damage around the field, or taking 2 one-prize knockouts with Magical Fire. Radiant Heatran is like our damage soak here, because we want to Magma Base into it, and then move it up with Fire Off. So we're accumulating damage on this over time, and if we ping it twice with Magma Basin 2 consecutive turns, then it's doing 280, we can drop a Maximum Belt onto it, and then it's KOing Charizard, which is absolutely nutty. Professor's Research is a 3 of here. We want to be able to get fires in discard, and we don't have as many sack outs in this deck compared to others, but we do have Starbirth for being able to grab 2 pieces to make that a little bit easier. Research also helps with that. We've got 3 Iono for Disruptive Draw, 3 Boss to be able to pull up the specific targets that we want to pull up, 2 Mela instead of Airy in this deck. Normally, Airy would be in most Arc decks, but this one wants to keep fire on the field for if you accelerate fire onto the field and then they just kind of bonk the one thing that had most of the fire on it. You want to be able to recoup fire with Mela. You can use this card only if your Pokemon were if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Attach a basic fire from your discard to one of your Pokemon, and then draw until you have 6 in hand. This is really good for recouping energy. You could theoretically cut one of them if you want, but I definitely like having the 2 here. And then we've got an Arven, because off of Starbirth, being able to grab 2 pieces at the same time is relevant. Sometimes you'll need both Energy, Max Belt, and another evolution in order to move up energy. For example, this deck has one niche over the previous one that Tina can't do, and that's it has the ability to hit 230 on turn 2 against V Pokemon. Because of the ability to go attach either Fire or Jet turn 1, and then Magma Base into one of the Fire Pokemon. Then turn 2, you go attach another one that's not DTE, and then evolve Armourouge, Fire Off, move up an energy. You're now swinging for 200 instead of the 180 with the DTE minus. Now you can go Choice Belt onto this, and then KO a V. Which is also another reason why we want the Arven here, because the Arven lets us establish both the Armourouge, grab the Choice Belt, and with the second piece off Starbirth, we can grab the energy that we want. That's the main reason why I think this deck actually has, like, a relevant place in the meta, and why it's a consideration for Orlando for me, is it has that niche over the Lost Tina. That's the reason why I think this one's my favorite Arc deck right now. I would say that it is even into Zard, mainly due to the Radiant Heatran, and the fact that they can't really KO Arceus in the early game. Against hands, you're favored, because it's hard for hands to actually KO these big Pokemon. You just want to kind of not be putting down the Mew in that matchup. Lugia is unfavored. It's hard to beat Lugia, but it's possible because you can do that Trinity Nova for 230 on turn 2. That's the thing that I think makes this matchup a little bit closer, is the fact that you can hit 230 on turn 2 with Trinity Nova. Ancient Box, I would say, is favored. It's hard for them to push through your deck, and you do still have things that can just kind of bonk them, whether it be Trinity Nova for 200, Blaze Blitz here, or you can swing the prize trade by swinging with Radiant Heatran. It's already swinging for 140 with a single ping on it, and with 2 pings, you're swinging all the way through their Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, which is nice. Chi and Pao is still unfavored. Chi and Pao is probably one of the worst matchups for this deck, because they can just kind of bonk you. Control is very favored, because no matter where your energy are throughout the board, you can always either get them back with Magma Basin, or just fire off and move them around the board however you want. in that specific matchup, you just don't want to bench the barrel. That's the only thing you don't want to do. But as long as you don't bench the barrel, I think that there is no way you lose to control with this deck. Arc decks, I would say you are even against most other Arc decks, although you do have the niche of being able to go Blaze Blitz with Choice Belt, so it might be a little bit more favored for you against other Arc decks. I do think that the Tina build definitely has a little bit of an edge over you. However, you can actually KO their RCSV if you go first. So I'd say you're favored into other Arc decks if you go first, basically. Then against Tina, I'd say it's unfavored. Again, they're just kind of faster. And since you don't play Airy, there's not really a way that you slow them down very easily. So I would say you just kind of have to take the L to Tina. But against Lost Box and Sablezard, I'd say you're favored due to your high HP and being able to just kind of press through. And Blaze Blitz and Magical Fire, and with Radiant Heatran as like a damage soak that can dish out high damage, I'd say you're definitely favored into Lost Box and Sablezard. Hoopa EX, again, is a problem if they play it, but you can definitely play around it, and you can just burst Pokemon into play periodically. And the fact that you have a ton of fire attackers and not just Arceus makes me think that the Lost Box matchup, even if they play Hoopa, is still favored for this particular deck. So those are the 4 decks that I'm considering for Orlando Regionals. I hope that this was insightful and kind of shared some insight on the format and might help you to decide on a deck for yourself if you're planning on going to Orlando or planning on playing in any other tournaments soon. I definitely like these 4 decks, and I'm still trying to decide on them. I will say these are not going to be the exact 60 that I bring to this event, mainly because I did promise several months ago that if they ever released a Full Art Nemona, I would play it to the next regional I go to, and they did. So I will be playing a Full Art Nemona in my list going into Orlando Regionals and trying to day 2 with it to get a Limitless page. So if you want me to day 2 with Nemona, comment down below, say go on guard, get day 2 with Nemona or something like that. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new, and I will catch you all later. Have a good night, trainers.